Harry, over the last 12 months, Uber's outperformed the S&P 500 by 102%. Over the time period, Uber's returned 125% as compared to 23% for the S&P. What's driving this outperformance? That's a pretty big outperformance.
Yeah, I think also if you look at the stock price for the few years before that, it had quite the underperformance of the S&P. In a way you could look like, hey, they're finally catching up, but definitely no doubt the stock price is crushing it these days, especially compared to their main competitor, Lyft. And I think really it's sort of a confluence of factors, but I think the easiest way to sum it up would be that the business is finally working well, right? They finally are at that sweet spot of growth has normalized a bit. They're commanding high prices. The macro environment for drivers, they've got a really high supply of drivers, which obviously means that they can pay them less, they can charge riders more. And so then that split, right, their take rate can increase. And obviously they're doing 8 to 10 or 12 million rides a day. And so when you start adding that all up, they're producing a lot of cash and the business is looking really healthy.
The business is healthy with a $7 billion buyback recently announced, but you mentioned Lyft.
hmm
Does Lyft survive?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny. I think I saw you at CES last year, so over a year ago. And I think the number one thing people are asking me over a year ago was about Lyft. And that was the exact question is, hey, what's going on with Lyft? Are they going to die? And here we are a year later, and they're still around. They're still doing millions of rides a day. And so I think if you look at for example, the share price divergence between Uber and Lyft is obviously huge, 10, 20, 30x, whatever it's at right now. But if you look at other important KPIs, metrics like number of rides per day, even revenue, the margin is a lot tighter. So I don't know exactly what to do with that information, but I would say that if you're doing a comparison, I guess in a way you could look at there's some opportunity with Lyft. And I don't really see a world where it's not impossible that Lyft could disappear. But I mean, there are a lot of industries where, hey, there's a number two player. It's still got a great brand name. Maybe it's not quite as good, quite as reliable, quite as profitable, but I don't really see them going away any day. If you look at I'm big at looking at the actual product. If I'm a driver or rider in Los Angeles right now, can I go get a Lyft ride? Absolutely, 100%. It may even be cheaper than Uber, right? So I feel like from that perspective, like it would just be hard for me to see Lyft completely disappearing when the actual product is not like the sky is falling when it comes to their stock price, but the actual product seems fine to me. Like you wouldn't even know that the stock price is down, whatever it is.
Are you seeing drivers wanting to drive for both Uber and Lyft like the early days? Remember, you get into an Uber or Lyft, they have both signs, and you're like, oh, okay, same product, different price.
Yeah, and I think that's actually another thing that really works in Lyft's favor. And that honestly, if I was Lyft, I would really lean into, and I don't think they've done the best job in the past of leaning into the fact that, like, hey, they're number two, own it. Uber is the big one. Let them spend all the money to recruit, acquire, train drivers, then go cherry pick the best ones, right? Then find the ones who want to drive for both Uber and Lyft, right? Like really lean into a lot of what my site, the Rideshare Guy, is about diverse. If you're a business owner, you have to diversify your income. What if something happens with Uber and you get temporarily deactivated? You got to go drive, you got to have Lyft as a backup, right? So even if you're not consistently driving for both Uber and Lyft, like in my book for drivers, literally one of the top things I tell them is go sign up for Uber and Lyft, have that backup plan, have that option. And so I think that works in Lyft's favor that even though Uber is more reliable, drivers can make more money, they can stay busier, right? I would tell every single driver in my audience of millions of drivers to go do both Uber and Lyft. And I think that you don't need a rocket scientist to tell you that. Like me, you can actually kind of figure that out on your own as a driver and sort of say, hey, I'm going to do Uber, I'm going to do Lyft. And I think stuff like that kind of works in Lyft's favor and especially if they leaned into it more.
What causes a driver to get deactivated? Do something really bad?
Well, I think that there's a few different types of deactivation. One would be, yeah, something really bad. You molest a passenger, you say something very inappropriate, you're drinking, right? But a lot of times, I mean, there are a lot of passengers out there who report drivers. Maybe they're trying to get the ride credit or do a little bit of a scam. And I mean, eventually Uber and Lyft will stop these, right? If you've taken 100 rides and you complain about 75 of the drivers, obviously they know that you're a bad passenger. So it's not hard for them to figure this out. Riders, definitely, they might say something, or maybe they just think the guy is intoxicated. So that's sort of more the serious situation. And typically what will happen as a driver, let's say you've got 25,000, and this is a big complaint the drivers have. Let's say you have 25,000 rides on Uber as a driver, 4.99 star rating. A passenger complains, they will temporarily deactivate you while you investigate, which is kind of ludicrous, right? If you're someone that experienced, obviously you're not going to jeopardize your whole driving career. But I think Uber and Lyft have done a really poor job of sort of parsing their risk on and liability side with the reality of a driver, right? Like someone that experience is probably not going to do anything bad. And if they are, maybe there's a way to give them the benefit of the doubt. So that's sort of the more serious situation. And in that situation, if you're driving for Uber, and that happens all the time, you would want to have Lyft as a backup, right? So you can go drive for them and you're not going to miss out on earnings. And then the smaller stuff would be like insurance document is expired and, Lyft's A or Uber's AI isn't accepting, the picture that you take on your phone, or you have to do these little selfie checks, and maybe you've grown a beard and your picture has you without a beard. There's a lot of little innocuous things that typically get resolved in hours or a day or less. If you get temporarily deactivated at midnight on a Saturday when peak earnings are happening, you're pretty pissed, right? So having that backup is important.
You're very pissed. So that's the driver side. How about the rider side? How much fraud is there? How many bad actors try and misbehave over there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that honestly, there's a pretty minimal amount of fraud because it's very easy to detect, right? If you are a driver or a rider, it's sort of like what these companies typically do is they use a baseline, right? So let's say that there's a million rides an hour and they have so much data, right? If there's a million rides an hour, they know what the average rating is on each ride. They know that, hey, there's probably one in a million, right? So there's probably multiple major safety incidents a day, right? So they'll look at a rider's history, right? So for example, if Grayson, you've taken, like I said, in your last 100 rides as either a rider or driver. If you're canceling too much as a driver, let's say you as a customer, Grayson, you request a ride, you start getting ready, and then the driver cancels, you don't realize, and now you're late to the airport, right? That's a really crappy situation, right? So Uber really does not like when drivers cancel too much. And so what they'll do is they'll look at the baseline cancellation rate in a city. Let's say things happen, right? So maybe it's 3%, 3 out of 100 rides, traffic, some issue comes up, driver decides like, oh, I really don't want this ride. Like 3 out of 100. I don't know what the actual number is, but let's say it's 3 out of 100. Pretty reasonable. Things happen. Things come up. So if you're canceling as a driver 6 out of 100 rides, Uber's going to start warning you and sending you notifications. Hey, stop doing this. This is a really crappy experience for passengers, right? And if you keep going above that, they will eventually deactivate. Drivers often complain that Uber doesn't do the greatest job warning you. Like they'll just deactivate you without warning you. So that's how it's supposed to work in theory, right? And obviously we know things don't always work out like they're supposed to, but that's the idea behind it. And so you can sort of see that honestly, fraud is not super difficult to detect. And then, that's sort of one of the great things about Uber and Lyft is that they have these systems in place to detect bad behavior, detect bad drivers, to detect fraud. There's always ways around it. I did a little short on my YouTube and TikTok the other day that sort of was popular, and was a guy, one of my buddies in Florida actually, and he had a $150 ride at a Fort Myers, I believe, at the airport. He gets into the back of the Lyft car, and the guy hands him the phone. He didn't really speak English, I guess, and someone on the other line says, hey, you got to pay this driver $150 in cash to get where you're going, right? Now, the driver, they probably saw that this was a long ride. Lyft maybe is taking a bigger cut, so they probably think, hey, let me try and get this rider to pay cash. And so obviously, or not obviously, but my friend said, heck no, I'm not doing that. And he got out of the car. And what the scam was that was really tricky, to be honest, was the driver never started the trip. And so he canceled it when this happened. And then my friend went to report it to Lyft and it didn't show up in his history because the driver never started it. So there are some edge cases like that hopefully if someone's listening from Lyft, they'll figure this out and go fix that. And then that driver will eventually they're going to figure this out. But yeah, there are little scams and hacks like that both drivers and riders are guilty of at times.
The airport you're referring to is the RSW airport in Fort Myers, going West Coast, most of the traffic goes down to Naples. So I've been a victim of that scam, but I caught the son of a bitch 3 times. I'm with my family. We're at Disneyland Paris.
Yeah.
And we're staying at this beautiful chateau out in the suburbs, and we're trying to get back to the chateau. So I order an Uber 3 in a row. They pull up. You're paying cash, right? Nope. You're paying cash, right? Nope. You're paying cash. Right?
Interesting.
Nope. And it took me to the 4th driver. And so you and I have relationships with Uber. And I called Uber and they said, yes, we're well aware of the problem with Disneyland Paris. It took 4 drivers to finally get me to somebody that was going to be honest and by the book.
Yeah.
And so the honest by the book guy, he got a nice tip.
Yeah. Well, if you sort of understand the economics and incentives of drivers, you'll kind of at least understand why they're doing this. Now, I think this is pretty shady behavior, and I'm definitely telling drivers that they shouldn't be doing this. But the reason why they're doing it, typically, let's say airports or busy areas, it's a lot more work, right? At the airport, I mean, I saw the other day in LAX, there's a 200 to 300 driver queue, right? So that means you have to wait your turn, 2 to 300 drivers have to get UberX trips in front of you before you get yours. So you imagine that's a kind of a hassle. You got to wait. And then when you get that ride, obviously you don't want the guy that's going 15 minutes down the road from LAX to Marina Del Rey. You want the one going to the valley that's going to be $80, maybe surging, right? You're really kind of
Hmm.
hunting for those longer trips. And so if you get, and then sometimes now with the system that both Uber and Lyft use on those longer trips and on those higher surge trips, they actually decouple what the passenger pays and what the driver gets. You used to get about 80% of what the passenger was paying, but now it's actually decoupled, right? So on those longer trips, the idea is on shorter trips, you get more, and on longer trips, you get less. But on the longer trips or the higher surge trips, that's where Uber and Lyft take their highest cut, right? So they might take a 40, 50, 60, 70, we've even seen as high as 80% basically take rate on certain trips, right? And the average is a lot closer to 30 to 40%, but there are trips, there's a lot of variability, right? So drivers, they see that one time and they're like, oh, hell no, I just did all the work. And Uber took 75%. The next passenger I get, the next Grayson I get who wants to go far and it's surging, I'm going to say, hey, why don't you just pay me? You paid Uber 200. I only got 75. Why don't I charge you 125 cash and we both win? So that's kind of why, at least you understand why they're doing that, whether you agree with it or not.
It makes sense. The ride was 150 euros, so
Mhm.
it's a dollar eight now, dollar nine, so basically $170. So US, so that makes a lot of sense. JP Morgan estimates that the average Uber driver makes $33 an hour. Do you agree with that data?
So that data is typically referring to active hours, right? So this is basically the way that you could kind of most simply look at it is you break it up into periods. So period one would be when I'm on the Uber app and I'm waiting for a request. So I could be sitting there, I could be driving around, I could be at the LAX queue with 300 drivers ahead of me. So obviously you want to, as a driver, you want to minimize that period one time because you're not getting paid for that period one time. So when Uber and Lyft typically report earnings, and this has been a big criticism because honestly, like JP Morgan, hey, they should probably come chat with me because they're reporting $33 an hour and everyone takes it as, oh, Uber drivers are making 33 an hour, but it's only active time, period 2 and 3, right? Which means that once you accept a trip, you're driving to the customer, that's period 2. And then once you have the passenger in the car, that's period 3. Right. And so period 3, you want to max. That's when you make the most amount of money as a driver, right? You want your wheels moving. You want to be going fast. You want to be going far. Right. And that's kind of how you make the most amount of money. So $33 an hour is basically saying drivers make 33 an hour when they're driving to a customer or they have a customer in the car, but we're not going to count any of the downtime. So if drivers are really busy, they're going to be close to $33 an hour, right? If they're Friday, Saturday night, maybe they can get 90% utilization. They're not waiting around much for a ride. They might be at $30 an hour, $25 an hour. But if it's slow, if it's not busy, you could be 50% utilization. So boom, $16.50 an hour. And then the other thing, this number is before expenses. Uber and Lyft drivers are responsible for their own expenses, right? Vehicle maintenance, depreciation, gas or charging. If you provide water bottles, mints, whatever it might be, that all comes out of your pocket. And so we've kind of estimated that might be another $5 to $7 an hour. So you could sort of see, hey, you're at $16.50 an hour if you're not busy. And then now let's say you drop down another $6 an hour, you're making $10 an hour after expenses when it's not busy. So what my site and my business is all about is figuring out how to maximize that number, when to drive, how to drive when it's busy, find where it's busy, where the surge rides are, and, kind of get as close to that $33 an hour number as possible. But you could sort of see and imagine that there's a ton of variation. So that's why when you talk to some drivers, you might meet some that say, yeah, I make 25, 30, $40 an hour. But others might be protesting like they were last week saying, oh, I only make $5 an hour, right? And so that's kind of that variability I think is really important to understand when it comes to earnings. Because, for Uber, obviously it makes them look really good to say drivers are making 33 an hour, but there's a bit more to the story.
Is period one when you're waiting for a ride, you're sitting in the lot, or you're just driving around? Is that technically defined as period one?
Yeah. So period one, Uber might describe it as, oh, you're on the couch, you're waiting for a ride. But typically it's more you're out circling. Usually you're downtown, there's nowhere to park. So you're probably circling around, waiting for a ride. And you have about 8 seconds to gather all the information and click yes or no. You might be driving 30 miles an hour down the street. It's quite unsafe, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, that's period one. It's basically waiting. And on the insurance side of things, this is also the kind of gray area where Uber and Lyft provide no collision coverage to drivers and very limited liability. So as a driver, you might want additional coverage called rideshare insurance, which is basically like a 10 to 20% extra addendum cost-wise to your regular personal insurance policy. And then it just covers you a lot better during period one. Uber and Lyft provide great insurance, $1 million of liability when a passenger's in the car, when a driver's on their own, as you might imagine. It's a little dicier.
Insurance is complicated. Our buddy Ed Walker over at Hub does a really good job of breaking it down. He's been on the podcast. He's
Oh,
coming back
nice.
on again. We both know Ed. So I want to give you some insight from Uber's Investor Day. In Q4 2020, at Uber's Investor Day, they indicated, they didn't confirm, but they indicated, this is a Bank of America report, I'm
Mhm.
quoting here, that there are currently 6.8 million monthly drivers and couriers, up 30% year over year, with the average driver utilization down as supplies increase rapidly. Do you agree with that?
Sounds about right to me. Dara has done a few tech podcasts, maybe 3 to 5 tech podcasts over the past year or two. And I think that he's been highlighting different numbers. And on the driver supply side, definitely all signs point to the fact that driver supply is at an all-time high. I think that Uber has kind of reported this. And of course, from my audience, what we're looking at is, first of all, just how many drivers are complaining. And what they would be complaining about is the fact that, like, hey, my utilization is down. Wow, there's a lot of other drivers on the road. And it's tricky, right? Because it's a marketplace, right? So if I'm a driver and I'm out there, I'm not getting any rides, it could be for two reasons, right? It could be because there are 1,000 drivers out there and only 100 rides, or it could be that there are only 100 riders out there and on the demand side, right, there could only be 10 rides happening instead of and only 10 drivers, right? So it's sort of like you have to think about supply and demand. And what we look at on the supply side to understand how many drivers there are the weekly incentives that Uber and Lyft dole out to drivers, right? And so these are typically trip-based bonuses. So Uber calls them Quest, Lyft calls them Weekly Ride Challenge. And basically what it is, like, Uber and Lyft will say, hey, drive Monday through Friday during these times, and we'll give you a $2 per trip bonus. And so that's kind of the gist of the system. During the pandemic and during COVID, when they didn't have enough drivers, we were seeing $300, $400, $500, $600 weekly bonuses, right? To do 50 trips, 100 trips, right? So really high, up to $5, $6, $7, $8 per trip bonus on top of what you got from that ride. And this is when they were really desperate for drivers. And these weekly Quest bonuses are offered in the biggest cities, LA, Chicago, San Francisco, New York. In the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, there just isn't as much demand. And so they don't offer nearly as strong bonuses or no bonuses at all. And so we've really seen those bonuses basically from drivers. I mean, all I have to do is log into my Uber driver app and see, okay, what are they offering, this week? And then talk to 5, 10 drivers in LA. And so there's been a pretty clear trend down in those bonuses. And then Uber has also, kind of indicated that they've dropped that down. So I think it definitely makes sense. And that's one of the reasons why I think Uber is in such a strong position financially on the supply side. They've got a lot of drivers. And so what that means is that, yeah, they don't have to be as concerned about utilization, right? So that 33 an hour that their active time that drivers are getting, right? That number, right? They don't really care if I'm a driver and I'm sitting there unutilized for 50% of the time, right? Because that's the kind of great thing about Uber and Lyft and using 1099 workers is you don't have to pay for that downtime. You only have to pay them when they're working. So you've got like this flexible supply. You can scale up to meet demand using surge pricing, but on the downside, you don't have to worry about that. So that's sort of why the business model is so beautiful and why they're printing so much cash these days.
As Uber gets stronger, do incentives go away for Uber while Lyft, on the other hand, probably doubles or triples incentives to try and gain market share here in the United States?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of what we're seeing. Lyft's new CEO, David Risher, literally came out and said one of his big first announcements was that, hey, we're going to start paying drivers more weekly bonuses, more weekly incentives to kind of pull them away from Uber. And I think one of the kind of under the radar battles that happens on a week to week basis between Uber and Lyft is this battle for what we call power drivers, right? So 70 to 80% of Uber and Lyft drivers are part-time. They do 10, 15, 20 hours a week or less. They're kind of people like me. They sign up, they might have another job. I might take a week on, I might a week off. Like, I'm not great for the companies. I'm sort of unreliable as an individual driver. In mass, though, we're valuable, right? Because it's like, hey, they can push a bunch of bonuses. I'm like, oh, I'll go drive Saturday night if I could get surge pricing or a bonus. But the full-time drivers who are doing 40 hours a week or more, like Uber doesn't advertise, hey, come slave away in your car and work 40, 50 hours a week and, for close to minimum wage, right? They sort of highlight the benefits and the flexibility, but there are about 20% of drivers who do a majority of the trips and miles on the platform. And they're the guys and the gals who are working 40, 50, 60 hours a week or more. And really what these drivers do is they allow Uber and Lyft to kind of have that baseline, right? So they establish that baseline. We know based off historical data and weather and all of that, right, in a given city, kind of what our baseline might be for demand. And so they kind of, if they're able to fill that with those full-time drivers, they use the weekly incentives to kind of lock you in like, hey, drive Monday through Friday and we'll give you a little bit of a bonus. Even if it's a small amount, 50 cents per trip, obviously as a driver, if you're going to drive that anyways, you're going to kind of sign up for that bonus and it gives a little bit better forecasting to the companies. And so if I'm Lyft, that's kind of, again, right, like you can always maybe poach a little bit of these power drivers just by offering them a little bit higher bonus one week. And that may not be sustainable because it might cost you a lot of money, but there is this kind of like active supply that if or when you need it, and if you're willing to pay for it, you kind of always grab it.
What's the most common car that power drivers are using? Obviously, they're putting a lot of
Yeah.
wear and tear on the car, a lot of miles. Is there a certain, you say anything in your data?
Yeah, I mean, we've done an annual survey going back almost every year of the business, and typically the Toyota Prius has been one of the most popular vehicles for drivers. Toyota is by far the most popular manufacturer for rideshare drivers, so things like the Camry. A lot of the fleet owners who are buying and then renting vehicles to Uber and Lyft drivers on a weekly basis. I know that a lot of them love the Toyota Camry, buy a 2 to 3 year old used Toyota Camry just off of the steep portion of the depreciation curve, only 5, 10, 20,000 miles, run it till it's got 100,000 miles, sell it and kind of rinse and repeat. So I would say that's definitely popular. And then the EVs have a lot of hype right now, but I think the EVs are kind of growing. I saw that in New York City, there's now 10,000 EVs on the streets out of about close to 100,000 vehicles. I think definitely the more reliable, a lot of the Asian made OEMs that are known for reliability and low maintenance costs and things like that, because that's one thing that really creeps up on a lot of drivers. I'll quiz you right now, Grayson. How many miles do you think a full-time Uber and Lyft driver puts on their vehicle in a single week?
2 to 3,000?
Yeah, that's a pretty good guess. So it's a little bit less, but I would say probably 1,500 is a good number. And that's per week, right? So that's 6,000 miles per month. Like the average driver does 1,000 miles a month, right? So if you think about it, they're doing 6x if you're a full-time driver. So think about like how often you get an oil change. You have to do that 6 times as frequently, right? Your brakes, you have to do that 6 times as frequently, right? Any maintenance issues, right? So you really, if you're a full-time driver, you're really going to put a lot of miles on your car. And so that maintenance, having that reliability, nothing breaks down, right? Really does matter and is important to drivers and obviously kind of feeds into their bottom line too. So I think that's kind of what we've seen on the vehicle side.
Where do the Tesla Model 3s and Model Ys fit into the equation today?
Yeah. So Tesla Model 3, the Hertz, so Hertz basically is one of Uber and Lyft's, but primarily Uber and Hertz have a big partnership where Hertz actually uses Tesla Model 3s and rents them to Uber drivers. And it's a pretty large partnership. I think that close to 10% of the miles driven on Uber in California are from EVs. And I think a big driver of that is the Hertz partnership, the Tesla Model 3. So a lot of drivers, they typically live in lower socioeconomic areas. If you look at Los Angeles or San Francisco, right, the core area where all the rides are, that's the most expensive part of this town. Like Uber drivers making 15 to 20 bucks an hour can't afford multi-million dollar houses, right? So they live east, north, south, west, right? Wherever it's cheaper in any given dense city, right? And a lot of times they don't have access to home charging or it's cost prohibitive to install a home charger, right? And so this Tesla Model 3 program, I think, has been really popular with Uber drivers, especially in a place like California where gas prices are high. So it's expensive. You might pay 400 bucks a week to rent a Tesla Model 3 from Hertz, but you do get unlimited mileage. It's a very flexible week-to-week rental, and then you just have to pay for supercharging, which might be 100, 200 bucks a week if you're a full-time driver. But the Tesla network is so powerful for rideshare drivers because it's so dummy-proof, right? The car literally tells you when and where to charge, and it's fast. Right? If you're an Uber driver, time is money, right? So you can't be sitting there finding a charger. Oh, it's broken. It hasn't been used in a while. And then when you do charge, you need it fast, right? You want that 3, 4, 5, 600 miles an hour Tesla supercharging, right? Speeds and to kind of replenish your tank as quickly as possible. And there's some challenges with EVs, and I think they're a little bit overhyped, but you can definitely see one thing that I look to, I sort of look and see like, what is Uber making Dara do, right? Look at his Twitter profile, look at the interviews he's doing, like they're making him push EV a lot. So you can tell that they are investing a lot into EV. They've announced things, they're doing pilots, programs. And then also it's just like simply like, what are they making the CEO talk about? Like I see Dara tweeting about this Tesla partnership and, oh, I'm writing an e-bike. So you can sort of tell that sometimes how important certain areas or initiatives are to companies just by like, what do they make the CEO spend his time on, right? And so that's definitely one thing that I've seen on the EV side there. There's a bit of hype, but the companies are pushing it pretty hard too.
You've interviewed Dara several times. What's he like?
I have. I think he's really sharp. I've interviewed him, I think 3 or 4 times, once in person. I haven't interviewed him in a few years. So I will say Lyft CEO has come on my podcast and our Show Me the Money Club live show for drivers on YouTube. But I don't know. I haven't heard from Dara in a few years. So that's sort of where I was joking earlier that he's done a bunch of big tech podcasts. And I feel like he's like kind of forgotten about, like, he's sort of like, oh, stock price is killing it. We've got tons of drivers and like, let's throw them to the side of the road now. Like Harry, rideshare guy, we don't really care about that anymore now that we're killing it on the stock price. So maybe that's just me a little bit bitter. But what he's like as a person, I actually, like, the first time I interviewed and met him in person at a driver event in LA, I was very impressed. I thought that he really, like, drivers probably think Dara spends 24/7 thinking about drivers. But, as we've kind of talked about in this podcast, and he's got financial, investors, drivers, riders, eats, Uber Freight, right? He's got a lot political things. He's got a lot of different considerations as a CEO of a multi-$100 billion company, and drivers are one piece. It's important, but it's only one piece. And so when I've interviewed him, I've been impressed with his knowledge and kind of detail of the driver situation. And maybe his team just does a really good job prepping him, but I have been impressed with kind of how much he knows about drivers with the understanding that, like, this is only one part of his job. And at the LA driver event we did, there were a bunch of drivers in the audience, and afterwards they were coming up, shaking his hand and telling him like, oh, I had this issue with a rider. And it was just funny. Like, these drivers got the chance to talk to the CEO, and they were having like him resolve like very minor customer service type issues. And Dara was pulling in his product managers like, hey, you got to look into this. And product manager had probably never talked to Dara in his life and probably pretty worried. So you could sort of tell, like, cameras were off. He was still there. He didn't just bounce afterwards. And so I think initially, like, I sort of really got that feeling. I don't know. I don't really get that feeling as much from him these days. Like, I kind of feel like maybe it's a little bit selfish because my business is all about drivers, but I feel like Uber has a really good supply of drivers right now. And so it's sort of like they don't care about them as much anymore. Like, I haven't heard him or seen him talking about drivers or going out and doing rides or anything like that like he used to. So that would be my only kind of current complaint.
How are drivers feeling about the really great customer service at the driver event? How are they feeling about him today?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think drivers have really heard from him in a while. So I don't know that they have super strong opinions of him as a CEO. I mean, I think that if you go on Twitter, you look at these strikes that happen, right? There's always people, like a small number of people who are very loud and might be saying very negative things against the CEO, like, oh, he's making a ton of money and the stock price is doing so well. So I think that's a small number of very vocal people. I think the majority of drivers, honestly, like, don't care about Dara. They're kind of out there doing their thing. Like, what they care about is like, I need to make $100 by the end of the day, and I'm going to go out and give rides. And how can I get that accomplished as quickly as possible in as little time as possible? So honestly, like, I feel that a lot of drivers don't really care too much about the CEO. They're kind of more concerned with their day to day and how do they make money and put food on the table.
Do you see anything in your data or the interviews that you do with drivers where they take a X% of their earnings and buy Uber stock to have skin in the game, have ownership as they're the backbone of this company today?
I think that this has always been a bit of a tension between drivers and the company, is that especially early on when it was a private company, and obviously all of the early investors and employees made insane amounts of money. And now with the recent surge in the stock price, a lot of employees and CEOs are again making a lot of money. Uber has tried some programs here and there in the past where they've doled out little bonuses or little stock as sort of thank yous, but it's always been kind of a little bit of a one-time thing. And I felt like a lot more PR than reality. The reality for drivers, though, is that, like, they don't have a lot of extra money to invest in Uber stock, right? So they're kind of covering more of they're working to kind of cover their expenses. A lot of drivers actually drive more based on goals, right? Sort of like I said, like, hey, I've got XYZ in expenses. I've got $200, or, I need to make $700 a week. And so I'm going to drive 7 days until I get to $100 each day. And so a lot of drivers kind of think about it a little bit more binary like that versus like holistically, like, I'm going to make a bunch of money. I'm going to stock up in the summer when it's busy and invest in Uber stock. So I think in theory that would be great. But really, I don't remember the last time I heard a driver tell me they invested in Uber stock, to be honest.
Scary and sad at the same time. It would be a simple plan to take 10% of all your after-tax earnings and invest in the company that you drive for, because then you can start to generate wealth. I just think if you're putting your heart and soul to this.
Honestly, I think it's a missed opportunity for Uber and Lyft. I think it would be a good way for the companies to really align interests, right? If I'm a driver, and maybe they can't give away stock, right? But maybe they can facilitate it. They can nudge it. They can encourage it. Maybe they can set up something like, I haven't seen anything, right? Like, maybe at a minimum, it's like, hey, we'll set up We just partnered with a brokerage company and we're going to do no fee trades, right? So every time you want, you can take some of your paycheck and easily invest it in Uber stock for no fees. Something like small that sort of like shows a token, right? That shows some skin in the game. Maybe they can't give you a share of Uber stock, or maybe they can. Maybe once you hit 1,000 trips, they give you 1 share of Uber stock, like something that aligns interests. Because then I do think you would have more drivers kind of interested in the success and kind of having that ownership, right? Like I think one of the complaints we've heard about Uber from customers and passengers is like, wow, the experience kind of sucks these days. You can still get a ride, but like cars are old, drivers aren't making, they're trying to do cash rides, right? And so I think like it's really hard to scale when you have 6.8 million drivers. So like thinking about programs like that, like kind of, hey, Uber stock price is killing it. Wow, if every driver would have owned one stock, literally one stock, right? Even the financial gain wouldn't have been huge, right? But the psychological gain would have been huge. And I think this is one thing that the companies do a horrible job of. They really don't understand that perception is a lot more important than reality for a lot of these drivers. Like if you go and ask drivers, we did a huge survey on our YouTube channel, and I think we got thousands of responses, and we asked drivers what they thought Uber and Lyft's take rate was. And so this is passenger pays $100, Uber typically keeps around $30, drivers keep around 70 on average, right? But there are rides where Uber takes a lot, and drivers tend to remember those. And so when we surveyed our drivers, I think like 60% of drivers thought that Uber and Lyft's take rate was 50 to 75%, which is insane. It's like the opposite of that. Oh, and so you have all these drivers, and Uber and Lyft do a horrible job of explaining the take rate. And so they all think that, like, how good would you feel about a company that took 75% out of every ride? You'd be like, this company sucks, right? And so obviously that's going to manifest itself, when people, take rides. And, there's still millions of rides happening a day. So it's not like it's a terrible product. But I just think that would be a cool opportunity to kind of fix and work on if I were the companies.
Not financial advice, not legal advice, no advice, but how simple would it be? It's very simple with an ADP-like program that you can opt into a program and X% of your earnings go to a brokerage account. They can't tell you or advise you to invest in that stock, but they can put it in a brokerage account for you and you can make
Yeah.
that decision. That becomes interesting. You start to create a savings plan. I mean, this is going back to the first term of George W. Bush when he looked at privatizing healthcare savings, and it never passed, but it's an example.
They could definitely facilitate. I think there are a couple issues with the 1099 versus W-2 that they would have to be a little careful, where maybe they can't just give you stock in the company since you're not an employee, and they're getting sued left and right for this employee versus 1099 issue in all these different states. So let's be honest, right? Like the people working at Uber and Lyft are pretty damn smart. If they wanted to, they could figure it out.
It's called savings.
Yeah.
It's a really good political message. So you're fighting all these 1099 battles, especially in California with the Uber PAC. Well done on the PAC. And you're fighting in multiple states. Well, you could say, well, Uber has a path to saving. Uber has a path to economic stability.
Yeah.
By initiating that, you can partner with a Vanguard or a TD Ameritrade, whatever it might be, or you can put it as simple as putting it in the S&P 500 if you don't want to buy Uber stuff, but you're giving them an option or a way to do automatic savings. And they do the DRIP, dividend reinvestment plans. Away they go 10 years later. Wow, where'd the $100,000 come from? Well, each percent of your check went there, and we know what happens with that. Overall, what are the biggest things that drivers would like to see changed on the platform?
I think that drivers always want to make more money. And honestly, I don't think this is that exclusive to gig economy. I think everyone wants more money. Like everyone literally always wants to make more regardless of their career or profession. And especially in work that is more frontline, that is more hourly work, right? Typically these folks, if you're working in retail or restaurant, like you're not paid a ton of money. And so making more does have a big impact, right, on your life and your bottom line. And so that's always been the number one kind of complaint, I guess you would say, over the past 10 years, no matter what the economic situation is or anything, like drivers always want to make more. I'd also say that take rate, right? Like it's not a great feeling to go out and do a trip and then Uber or Lyft takes 75% of it. You had a lot of hard work, right? Like maybe you had a tricky passenger or a pickup drop off, you had to wait, or it was like not a fun ride, or there's some issue, right? And so even if it's only one trip, right, it's really easy for drivers to focus in on that trip because you see at the end of the ride how much the passenger paid, what Uber and Lyft took. And so that's not a great feeling. And so that take rate is an issue. And then I think also around some of the sort of like, I would call it like deactivation and safety issues, right? Typically, taxi driving was a very dangerous job. It was one of the top 10 most dangerous jobs, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS. But Uber and Lyft, they have an extra layer of security. It's digitized, right? So it's safer, but you're still transporting drunk people. They may not be using a real account, or maybe a friend called the ride for them. And honestly, it's the drinking, right? There's obviously Friday, Saturday night. A lot of people are drinking, right? I've personally felt scared picking people up 2 a.m. Saturday night in Los Angeles in a dark alley. It's like, this is a little creepy. You know what I mean? So it's like, imagine I'm 6'3", 200 pounds. Imagine if you're a female driver, or imagine if you're smaller in stature. So it can be a bit of a scary job, I guess, at times, right? There are a lot of benefits. But so I think that safety component, right? And then, of course, too, you think about, hey, the fact that Uber and Lyft do 10 million rides a day. So there could be a 1 in a million chance of something happening. There could be 10 stories in the media every single day. Uber driver killed, or tax Uber, right? That could happen 10 times in a day, and it would still be a 1 in a million chance, right? And obviously companies, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So if something bad happens in an Uber, it gets reported a lot, right? And it's a big story, or even a small story. And so I think kind of when you combine all those factors, it can kind of feel, it's like, it can feel a little scary to be a driver. And so I think, the way that the companies handle it isn't always great. In my book, for example, I encourage drivers to use a dash cam, not only to record themselves, but, when a passenger gets into the car, they see a little blinking light, they tend to be on better behavior, right? So there's definitely things you can do to mitigate that. Like having, drivers are not trained at all, right? They legally cannot be trained as 1099 drivers, which is not great, because then you don't know how to handle. We have a lot of strategies for drivers about diffusing situations. Like, Grayson, you get into my car with an open container of beer, and I don't say, hey, jerk, throw that out, right? Like, that's how you start a fight, right? I would say, hey, I'm a crazy driver. Like, you probably want to finish that drink before you get in the car, or it's going to spill everywhere. I might crack a joke or something like that. Or I might say, hey, Grayson, I don't mind if you finish that beer and then we can go, right? Like, why don't you finish that beer and then I can take you to your destination, right? Which is a lot better than saying, finish that beer, throw that beer out, right? So I'm sort of putting the onus on the customer now. Like, obviously, you don't want to wait around, right? While you finish this beer, you want to get to your destination. So you're going to say, okay, I'll throw this beer out. Like, I kind of incept that into your head. They're like, oh, I'll throw this out so we can get moving, right? So there's like small strategies and things like that you can do. And honestly, I would say probably 90 to 95% of drivers don't do any of that type of diffusing the situation, right? And kind of walking that fine line. It's tough, but also, they haven't received any training.
Playing psychological jujitsu with them, and you're doing a really good job at that. They could make that all on your blog. Is that where all the data is? They sign up for one of your courses?
Yeah, probably the actual training piece. Typically on our website and YouTube, we're doing more kind of news coverage and interviews, the kind of more training. We have a course that we sell for Uber and Lyft drivers that's pretty inexpensive, $60 or $100. And then my book, it probably is the kind of most efficient and cheapest. And Amazon always seems to love discounting my book. I feel like I've seen it for like $1.99, which is kind of a slap in the face for $2 for a book that I work so hard on. But we've got all the sort of A to Z for drivers of how to kind of handle challenging situations. But really, it's more about the principles, right? It's kind of understanding, like, for drivers, we have one of the most popular chapters of my course is the training, like how to provide 5-star service. And it's kind of a combination. Like, we call it you have to be the captain of your ship. They can't walk all over you, but they also get to rate you. So how do you walk that fine line where, like, you tell them what they can and can't do, but you can't let them do whatever the heck they want? And you can't also be a dick about it, because then they might leave you a low rating. So that's what's kind of fun about educating drivers.
You have to educate. The dash cam, give you a great example. That's one of the things that led to the downfall of Travis, was the dash cam and his misbehavior in the back seat. It was caught on video.
Well, and I actually heard from a Lyft employee who said that they don't like dash cams because if you're a passenger, it can feel intrusive, right? Like, hey, is this guy live streaming to YouTube right now? Are they recording my conversation? Like, I don't, so I think that's one maybe reason why the companies haven't pushed dash cams as hard. Maybe they're, again, it's a marketplace, so it's tough. Like, you have to balance financial, safety, et cetera, concerns of drivers, riders, and the company. And the interests aren't always aligned, right? If I'm a driver, I kind of want as few drivers out on the road as possible. I want as high a surge pricing as possible, right? Riders want as many drivers, and Uber probably also wants as many drivers on the road, as low as surge pricing as possible, right? But on an individual level as a driver, I want to make as much money on this next trip as I can, right? So there's always some inherent tensions, I would say, in a marketplace like this.
Dash cam, you can have Uber taxi cab confessions. You have Lyft taxi cab confessions, the HBO show from the 90s that had, let's call it, interesting programming around that. Somebody could be terrified. Yeah. That brings up a really good point. The privacy issue. On the privacy issue, I think one of the big driving factors for the adoption of autonomous vehicles can be there's no driver, there's nobody listening to your conversation. How many times I won't take a call in an Uber or a Lyft. I exclusively use Uber. I won't take a call though.
Yeah, I think there's actually going to be way more technology, cameras, and listening. Because one of the things I always joke about autonomous is that, like, how are they going to handle the pukers, right? Right now, someone gets into the car. If they puke in my back seat, I immediately take pictures, report it to Uber. If you puke in an autonomous vehicle and they don't have a way to record audio and video, how do they know? It's like they're going to rely on the next passenger to say they puked, and then the passenger before will say, "Oh no, it was the guy before me." And it's like a very simple situation where honestly, like I think they will have to have cameras and audio. Maybe, I guess, if you trust Waymo, for example, to not do anything with that data, but I would actually say there'll probably be more recording in every single vehicle. You'll just have to kind of, as a customer, it'll depend more if you trust that company or not.
They turn it on when you're in the vehicle. They notify you. I could see it, and I'm not a Waymo employee, but I could see a time after the Waymo vehicle leaves, has to do a scan of the vehicle to see if there's puke or if you left a bag there. It's really interesting. Munich Re has the original insurance contract with Waymo for in-vehicle loss. If you leave a laptop in the vehicle or you leave your backpack, and they're able to notify, and that was insured for. So perhaps there is a scanning technology. From a driver's perspective, how are they thinking about it?
That's probably how they might do it. It's like, all right, how much does it cost to now do a scanning like, so that's sort of one of the interesting things. Maybe a good future podcast with you and I. It's like there are a lot of manual situations that right now drivers can just handle in a second. It's so easy, right? I look in the back seat before every passenger gets out. Did they leave anything? Did they puke in the back seat? Did they make a mess? Did they damage the vehicle? It takes me 1 second or less, and like any driver can do it. If you have to install some scanning technology in an AV, like how much is that going to cost? How well is that going to work? So there's sort of like a lot of these like manual, the pickup. I did a post on LinkedIn that was popular, and I talked about pickup and drop offs. Like that's the most challenging part of being a rideshare driver. You're downtown Los Angeles or San Francisco. There's nowhere legal to pull over and park. That's why they're double parked everywhere, causing traffic, causing chaos, right? Is Waymo going to be allowed to like program in that they can break the law and park in a red or double park? Like that would be, I'd be very surprised if like it's programmed in or negotiated with law. Like it's sort of like an unwritten rule as an Uber driver that you can do that, right? But you're technically breaking the law. So like our AV is going to be about to like legally break the law. So there's sort of like interesting little scenarios like that. And honestly, that's two right there, but there's probably dozens.
It goes back into what Argo was developing with naturalistic driving, where you want to blend into the community. You don't want to be a part of the community. We worked on years ago in Beverly Hills, we worked on the drop off and pickup zones. It's a big issue that's going to have to be overcome, but the technology is coming. Uber's clearly leaning into it. Dara made a lot of really great strategic moves. He dumped Uber ATG. He dumped Uber Elevate. And now he's operating it purely as a platform. So you can hail a Waymo today on the Uber in Phoenix. You have Uber Eats deliver motion autonomous vehicle in Santa Monica. What are your thoughts on Uber's autonomy strategy now?
I think it's definitely making sense to be a platform. You mentioned the Waymo integration. I think the emotional one, though, for example, it's still like there's still a driver in the car. So I am always a little, skeptical. It's, oh, we're launching autonomous rides. And I say, well, is there a driver in the car? If it is, it's not really autonomous to me yet, right? Like Waymo, I'm here in Los Angeles. They're actually riding around town with no drivers. Motional, I haven't seen the same. That's just my little pet peeve. But, when it comes to Uber's strategy with AV, I mean, I think it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, it was probably, it's easy to look back and say it was stupid to kind of try and develop AV technology. And I did feel that way at the time, and I do feel that way now. But I think if you understand the perspective of a founder like Travis Kalanick, like everyone told him Uber was a dumb idea when he was doing it, right? If you're building a startup, especially one that's this disruptive, it's going to sound like a bad idea, right? And so it was like he was kind of validated, like, wow, this was actually a pretty good idea. Okay, now I'm going to go do AVs. Oh, everyone's telling me this is a bad idea. We shouldn't do it. I was right last time. I'm going to do it again, right? And so it's really, I think that was one of the biggest things that when Dara came in, he kind of grew everything up, right? It's really hard to make that pivot as a founder, kind of have the mindset, us against the world, right? When you kind of start becoming $100 billion company, at a certain point, you kind of have to pivot, right? Away from growth and crazy moonshot things into more like, hey, let's make money. Let's get rid of all the junk that's not working. And so I think that strategy that, Dara has really focused on and professionalized really of kind of, hey, rides, eats, Uber Freight, even Uber Freight is pretty small. Like they're pretty focused now on, especially even rides, what makes them the most money. So when it comes to AVs, yeah, I think it's a no-brainer to integrate. And I think this is one thing that a lot of folks in the AV side have not thought about, the fact that like, why am I going to download this Waymo app to go and get a ride, or any AV app, if they only have 15 cars or 100 cars in Los Angeles. Like, I'd rather go to the Uber app and like, yeah, okay, if a Waymo's available, great, I'll take it. But if not, I need someone to pick me up. I need to go, right? Reliability is so important. And when you own a fleet, especially an expensive fleet of AVs, if you have enough supply to meet peak demand, Friday, Saturday nights, you have way too much, right, for Tuesday afternoon, right? So I almost feel like AVs and human fleets have to integrate, at least at the start, in order to kind of work and be successful and especially be profitable, right? Because that's the kind of profitability in the business model of AVs is like that hasn't even been touched yet, right? Because everyone's still focused on getting the technology down.
You need the hybrid approach. We were in Austin, Texas together. We're on our way to barbecue, and
Mm.
you decide to get the Uber app out and get an SUV, and everybody piled in there. And me being me, I had to wait for the cruise time. So you go 15 minutes. You're texting me from Terry Black's. Where are you? Where are you? We're here. We're here. We're here. And meanwhile, I'm sitting
Yeah.
there waiting. So you're right. It is the hybrid
Right.
approach.
Well, and right now it's sort of like AVs are very novel, right? Like I haven't even taken a Waymo ride in Los Angeles. I'm excited to take one, and they're actually going to be at our Herbivore conference at the end of March in downtown Los Angeles. So I'll be able to take one soon. But there's a lot of novelty. People are excited. The product is cool. It's working well. Right. And so I think that once that novelty wears off and people start relying on it a little bit more, you really have to solve that peak demand and, kind of own fleet, right? Like this is why Uber became so popular because you could never get a taxi ride because there weren't enough because they don't have variable supply, right? So I think if you understand those concepts, right, that they'll plug in well and it could work well. Maybe people will order an AV ride here and there, but to really scale effectively, I think you have to understand that variable pricing, the surge pricing for customers, figure out that variable supply. And so it just sort of seems like a no-brainer to integrate into Uber or Lyft.
Definitely want to integrate it to Uber Lyft. I think dead man walking. Tell you that point blank. I don't think that they're going to survive. Unless the CEO wants to come on and debate
Yeah.
me, you're welcome to come on and debate me. I don't see any which way you survive. And you can't make a mistake like you made on your earnings to set the stock up and then sent it down from a decimal point or a fat thumb or whatever term you want to use that really caused that issue.
Well, I don't know what the downsides. I guess the only downside is if they're going to get sued from that. But if they're not going to get sued from that, I think it's kind of a funny mistake. But I don't know. Is there a big downside if they don't get sued? Is there really a downside? It's like, oh, we said it was 50, but it's 5 or whatever, 5, but 0.5, right? So I don't know.
You think it's funny? I could sit here and make a Gary Gensler argument that it's fraud.
I don't think, I think, well, I don't know the legal term of fraud, but I mean, if you make an accident, like with murder, right, it's like there's different definitions, right? There's manslaughter if it's accident, right? If it's murder 1 or 2, right, more premeditated. So I would say this is more on the kind of manslaughter category, not to compare apples to oranges.
Charles Manson?
I'm just saying it was, I don't know. That's sort of where it was like, it was a mistake, right? It was obviously, oh, maybe not obviously, but it seems like it was a mistake. So yeah, anyways, I don't really know anything about the stocks. I just talk about the companies and then let the guys above my pay grade figure out what to buy or sell.
I don't want to know how you know about all the different murder degrees. So we're going to leave that to the side and get back to the meat of this conversation. If you compare Uber to Waymo, Waymo has a consistent product. Uber's biggest growth for years was X. X really changed the game for Uber, but Waymo's a consistent product. As Waymo scales 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, let's get to 1 million vehicles. Let's say it's running on par from a price perspective because Alphabet's still taking the loss. How is X going to compete? Because Waymo's a consistent product. It's a better product. They're luxury vehicles. How is Uber X product going to compete with Waymo?
I guess if you assume that the cost would be the same, then I would give a big leg up to Waymo, right? Because they would have that consistency, they would have that reliability. I think the only challenge would be Uber has variable supply. So they've got 6.8 million drivers. They don't have to pay those 6.8 million drivers if they're not driving. Right? If Waymo gets 6.8 million vehicles, they're going to want to use them. They're going to want to keep them utilized, right? And so I think that variable supply will always be, or not always, it will be indefinitely the advantage for Uber. And you could say, oh yeah, the quality isn't going to be as good, right? But they will always have that variable supply where they'll say, hey, Harry, we have customers willing to pay 2-3x right now for a ride. Come drive. And I'll say, sure, I'll do that right now. But I think the big assumption here is that the cost will be the same in the business model. And so I think that would be I'm not an expert in AVs. It's very challenging to run, optimize, operate a fleet of vehicles, add on expensive AV technology, right? And it's not Uber, for example. They tried to get into the fleet business. They lost $640 million with exchange leasing. And these are pretty smart guys. So running a fleet, especially at scale, if you don't know what you're doing, one mistake times 1 million cars, a $10 mistake, you just cost yourself $10 million, right? $100 mistake, $1,000, right? Across the fleet. You kind of didn't quite realize that for Teslas, for example, they've really been cutting the price, right? So if you had an assumption for depreciation of the vehicle that was -5 or 10% per year, and now it's -25%, that's a huge difference that will really impact your balance sheet. And so I think that's kind of running the fleet part is really, really challenging.
That's the beauty about Uber. They're not running the fleet. They're just going to collect a toll.
Well, they don't have to do it. Right. So I think that I guess that variable supply, and I kind of include in that not having to worry. I mean, what if let's say you're a fleet owner and you've got a million Teslas and there's an actual recall, not an over the air recall. There's an actual recall, and you have to now take all of your vehicles off for 1 to 2 hours and coordinate and work all that. With Uber, they just tell drivers, hey, yeah, if you've got a Tesla, you got to do this. And now it's on the driver to do it. And they kind of let them worry about it or not. And this is actually an issue because a lot of Uber drivers don't do the recalls. So Uber has it. So it's like good and bad, right?
That's the beauty of the Uber business model. It's a platform. How do you see Uber expanding their platform in the future? What's the next great growth cycle for Uber?
I think that rides are definitely the most profitable. And I think that's because on the customer side, you don't have any great alternatives, right? If you're out at the bars on Friday, Saturday night, how do you get home? You're going to call a taxi? No, you're going to call an Uber. You're going to press a ride for an Uber, right? If you called me and asked me for a ride to the airport, I would say, what? Take an Uber. Why would I take you to the airport? So it's like they're ingrained in certain areas where customers are willing to pay a lot of money for those Friday, Saturday night rides. They're willing to pay a lot of money to get to the airport or to get home. And so you don't have a lot of great alternatives there. And then on the food delivery side, I think it's obviously a big growth engine for them. But I think there are a lot of great alternatives for customers, right? They can order groceries, they can order in, they can pick up the food. They can make food at home. They can go out to dinner instead of ordering in, right? For about the same cost, right? And so it's not that it's a bad business. You just have a lot of alternatives. So there's a limited pricing power that you have if there's all these great alternatives, right? And so I don't really see food delivery as a sector in general as being a big profitable sector. Maybe they can make some money off advertising. It's not going to be like rideshare where they can charge the customers a lot, pay the drivers a little, and keep that big spread. So as far as like their growth engines, like I'm not really sure what it might be. To be honest, like I'm a bit skeptical that Uber Freight or Uber has done this. I think they call it Uber for Work, where they're lining up different job opportunities. Like if I go to drive for Uber, I want to drive for Uber. I don't want to go work at the stadium on the weekends, So maybe 5% of people want to do that, but not 95% of people. So I think the one big thing, and I think it was on my podcast. I had a guy who used to work at Uber. I think it was my interview with Chris Taylor, who used to work at Uber and Bird. And I believe one of the things, it was either him or I that we talked about that would be a big potential growth area for them is in the future. All these kids who grew up with Uber, maybe they don't get licenses. Maybe they don't go and buy a car in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And that could be an interesting step function change where, hey, if you don't own a car and now you need to take Uber to and from work every day, like right now, the average family owns 2.2 vehicles or something crazy like that, right? And so most people have a car, so it's hard to get them to switch and say, hey, go sell your car and take Uber. But if you have people growing up who never need to buy a car, that could be interesting for Uber and could be a big step function. And that now they need 10, 15, 20 rides a week. Maybe they do some biking. Maybe they rent a car from Uber, right? That kind of mobility platform might be more appealing to younger people. So that's the only thing that I would say big potential growth area.
What about advertising? So advertising is now a $900 million a year revenue. They're going to go to $1 billion this year. They have 550,000 advertisers. What are your thoughts on that business?
I'm pretty bullish on advertising for Uber because they've got on the food side, they've got basically a pretty good product. You search for Greek food and they can put an advertisement right at the top for Greek food. So it's really targeted, effective advertising, right, that they can do. And I think on the ride side, they've done a lot more what I would call high impression ads until this point, where it's basically, hey, they do 12 million rides a day. Let's show an ad to every single person who orders a ride for the new Tom Cruise movie coming out. I don't care about Tom Cruise. I don't care about action. It's going to be very low follow through or intent from these, but they show it to 12 million people. So it works on an impression basis. I think they've got some really interesting opportunities to do more targeted, more intent-based ads, right? Like Grayson, you're going to the Beverly Hills Hotel. what about going over to Wolf? What about going over to this other hotel and we'll give you a 10% off coupon for that restaurant? You know what I mean? Like seeing where people are going. They're going to a bar. Let's show them, okay, Budweiser just had a bunch of issues in the media. Let's start showing people right before they arrive at their bar. Let's pop up a notification. Don't forget to try our new beer or to try a Bud Light, or hey, here's a coupon for going to this bar and we can give you $1 off your beer when you walk in. So I think there's a lot of more trip-based intent advertising that they can do. And there's a lot of surfaces they can advertise on too. They've acquired or partnered companies that are doing above car advertising on the roof, in-car advertising. There's startups we've seen in the past that are doing audio advertising. So like the music that you play in an Uber, you can get paid to do that. There's flashing on the side, right? There's all these like different surfaces that they could monetize basically if they want to. So I think that's a lot of opportunity for them.
Look at Amazon. One of the fastest growing business on Amazon is Amazon X. They have a platform and eyeballs. Uber has that. Beverly Hills Hotel, we've been there together, but perhaps we wanted to go to Bel Air. Would you like to go to the Hotel Bel Air or our sister? So I just gave an ad for the Dorchester collection right there. So they could pay for that impression. The average one member, there's 19 million of those members, spends 3.4% more than non-members. What can that unlock? To me, that's a whole, we talk about advertising, that could be a whole experiences platform that gets unlocked there.
I think one of the things that Uber loves about food delivery is that it's high frequency, right? How many times do you have to eat a day? 3 times? Maybe you need to order coffee once or twice. So there's a lot of opportunities to think about Uber Eats and to think about food delivery and to default to that Uber app, right? If you're doing Uber rides, like you might only do Friday, Saturday night, or you're going out to dinner, or you're going to the airport. Like how frequently do you go to the airport? Right? So it's like the frequency of food delivery and eating food and even groceries, like once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, right, is much higher. And so I think that's one area that the company, if I'm looking at it, it's, hey, rides make us a lot of money, but let's just like break even on food delivery and get people really used to using anytime they want to eat, they go to the Uber Eats app, right? And then we do have a loyalty program with Uber One where they get 5-10% off all of their food deliveries. And they do that a lot. And then they get upgrades on Rideshare, or they get better cars, or they get a little bit of a discount, or they add points or whatever. I don't really care about how they manifest the program, but the concept and the principle is to connect the two, right? And so I think that those two areas are very powerful. They're making a pretty big push into groceries because I think it fits into that. Beyond that, though, I don't know if there's a lot of synergies with other areas. Am I going to go to Uber app to rent a car because I save 5-10%? No, there's like such price parity when you rent a car. And I don't know what it is beyond that, but I do think that Uber One membership is pretty powerful with the rides, with the food delivery, little connections.
They're going to need to enhance it. So technically I could get it for free. I get a $15 a month American Express credit for it. It's $9.99, so technically I could have it free, but I don't see any reason, me personally, and I'm a very loyal Uber user, I use it multiple times a week, and I don't see an incentive to use it there. There has to be some sort of loyalty. They have the Marriott Bonvoy and they have the American Express partnership. Okay, fine. I'm not a Marriott person, but I'm an Amex person. They have to find out what is that, you want to use the term, what is that killer app? I think there's something missing in that program that could really accelerate growth.
I think that they haven't figured it out yet, but I also don't think it's been a priority yet, right? Like they've made, like right now they're focused on, hey, let's provide a great product. Let's make as much basically charge customers, not as much as they can, but let's like slowly charge customers more and let's slowly pay drivers less and just multiply that by the millions of rides we're doing. And that can make us a lot of money. Like we don't really need to dick around a ton with all these ads and loyalty and all that, right? But I do think that if I'm them, I'd start squirreling away for a rainy day, right? I would start, and I think they are doing this on the ad side. Like if an environment happens where we don't have an oversupply of drivers, let's be ready. And I think that's what they're doing on the ad side. I don't think they're really doing this on the loyalty side. They're trying some programs and trying some things here and there, but I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year or two, the team is pretty solid at Uber, right? If they start really trying to find what is compelling for riders, like someone like you, the average person, or maybe the average person who's not in tech or media, I gotta take an Uber because like, how did they get that airline level loyalty? Like right now they're here. How do they get up to that airline level loyalty where people are like, oh, I freaking hate American Airlines, but I'll fly them because I'm gold and there's like a 1% chance that I'll get upgraded. Like they need to aspire to that. And I think there's opportunities to do that. Maybe it's upgrade to a Tesla for free if something's available, upgrade to a black car, right? Like maybe they've tried a lot of this stuff in the past, but I don't think they've quite figured it out. Again, it's like that perception of value. Like where can they figure out where the highest ROI is on the perception of value where people are like, I have to take an Uber every time because I care about the environment and I get a free upgrade to a Tesla. You know what I mean? I don't know exactly what it might be, but I do think that there's a lot of cool opportunities for them to play around and probably use AI and some smart people and algorithms to figure it out. So I guess I'm convincing myself that I'm pretty bullish on the business in terms of advertising and some of these loyalty opportunities and things like that. And I guess their stock price reflects that too, because it's up there.
I like the perception of reality. Uber is a road to autonomy index component company, so we are very bullish on it as well. And we believe that it's going to play a critical role in the future of autonomy and mobility. Just don't be American Airlines, where if there's a new rule coming, if you don't book it on AA.com, you're not going to get loyalty points. You want to talk about how to mismanage loyalty program? Look at what the airline's done over the last 6 months.
I'm happy to throw American Airlines under the bus. I literally have a note. I'm about to book a vacation and I have a note from my last trip. I was like, don't book American because the food was horrible last time and work on that food. I do like the food on Delta, but anyways, back to rideshare.
But one last thing, and then don't raise baggage fees in the middle of the night.
I will say though, one thing that I think the two areas that have made my, I don't know, analysis or sort of the way I look at things, and I think I've had a lot of success with my business because the two things I've always focused on are like doing things in real life, right? Like I hear Uber talking about some product or service, and then I go out and try it as a driver or a rider, and I'm like, what? For a while, they're really touting the benefits of driving and delivering for Uber. You go out and you drive. You deliver like burgers at lunchtime and then you take a passenger afterwards and you're like, oh, your car smells like crap right now. And then the customer comes in and complains and gives you a low rating. So you're like, oh, sounds good on paper. In reality, driving and delivering is not so great. Literally, like the vehicle requirements, the age requirements are different. And there's some drivers that do it.
It comes down to loyalty. It comes down to experience. I'm very fortunate where I've been in probably every single autonomous vehicle and truck that's been made. So I'm able to have that experience and I'm able to talk about it and analyze it because a lot of individuals haven't been there. And I give you a lot of credit. I'll use the old Google term here. You ate your own dog food in the early days. You said, I'm going to leave my job at Boeing and I'm going to start driving and then I'm going to blog about it. Next thing, the rideshare guy is born and you're the de facto brand for all things rideshare. I want to get back to Uber here because this is an interesting statistic that came out in their earnings. 34% of Uber's customers now use multiple products each month. That's 34%. How do you see that growing over the next 12 months? Are we going to get to 40, 41, 42%?
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. That like you've got those synergies between rideshare, between food delivery, maybe on the demographic side, right? That people, I guess 34%, I don't know if that's high or low, right? But it definitely it is what it is, right? And so I'd say as far as it increasing, maybe it slowly increases if they make it more compelling to have a loyalty program that feeds better discounts on both rideshare and delivery. But I don't know that there's going to be huge growth in that number, right? Everyone already knows about Uber and everybody already knows about Uber Eats. So what's going to make you start using Uber Eats way more than you are right now, right? Like it's not a name, it's not a kind of brand opportunity. It's like everyone knows it's out there. So maybe it ticks up, but I don't know that there's anything in my mind that'll make that jump up.
My wife started using Uber Eats and she never used it, but now she started using it, but then the fees went up. So we stopped using it. So I looked at economic data. Consumers don't want to pay delivery fees now. They're driving to the locations to get them. So I really want to see over the coming quarters.
That's where I think it's tricky, right? Because I said, why would customers use food delivery more? Okay, if it's cheaper, sure, right? But if it's cheaper, where does that savings come from? You can't just pull it out of, if you want to give people 10% discount on delivery, where do you pull that discount from? You can't just pull it out of thin air, right? There's literally customers. And this is what's tricky about food delivery. It's a four-sided marketplace, right? You've got customers, you've got drivers, you've got the restaurants, you've got the platform, right? Uber Eats or DoorDash in this case, right? And restaurants say, oh, the fees are too expensive. And drivers say, oh, I'm not making enough. And customers are saying it's too expensive. Right? And the companies, the platforms food delivery is not that profitable, right? And I think I look at food delivery as more of a loyalty opportunity, as more of a frequency opportunity, as more of a growth engine and less on the profitability side, right? So I think it's a good diversification and a very good business for Uber to have, but I don't see it's not going to be bringing in cash, but maybe it's a good lead gen, or maybe it's a good way to get people using Uber app every single week or something like that.
Build stickiness, and now it delivers alcohol, which is great.
I think they got rid of Drizzly, actually. They acquired Drizzly and then shed it off.
But you can still have alcohol delivered.
But you can order alcohol. Yeah, you can get alcohol.
That's the key there. We alluded to this. The last business endeavor that we haven't really touched on is Uber Freight. Uber Freight has $18 billion under management of freight. They have investments. This is mothership now. Uber has investments in Aurora and Wabi. For fiscal year 2024, Goldman Sachs is projecting Uber Freight to do $5.120 billion in revenue, not profitable. And then furthermore, Bloomberg's reported that Uber is going to potentially spin out Uber Freight. Do you view Uber Freight as a long-term holding, or is this going to continue to be a drag on earnings and they should spin out the company?
It's a good question. I think that I'm no expert in trucking, even though our most popular YouTube video has 6 or 7 million views, and it's all about one of our guys. He quit Uber and Lyft to go drive a truck. So it's funny that I do know a little bit about truck driving. So we did a series of videos on this, and that were very popular. I don't really see any synergies between Uber Freight and the core business of giving rides and delivery. So I guess I don't know that it really, I guess from like a business perspective, like I don't know that it really makes sense to have it as part of Uber the business. So maybe it should either be sold off or spun out, and might be like a nice little windfall, right? If they can sell it for a decent amount. But I just don't really see any synergies into what they're building. So I don't really see it as a bad thing, but I also don't see it as a good thing. And so for the sake of simplification, it seems to me like it should be, gotten rid of, but, hasn't happened yet. I don't know. Maybe they're just waiting for the right time.
I don't see it in what's called Uber 2.0 under Dara. I don't see it fitting. I like the Uber Freight business for the long term. I don't like it inside of Uber proper. But the thing that's really confusing, Uber's just led lobby soon to be announced round with Bank of America for 50 million US. And Uber proper has the investment I said earlier in Aurora. They're making investments into autonomous trucking companies. They have this platform. So it says, okay, we're really not going to spin out, but yet Bloomberg's reporting and Uber confirmed they are exploring it. It just seems that Dara's kind of caught between the crosshairs here.
It might also be the fact that, hey, this is a good asset and they just want to get the best price for it. And so it's like until the timing is right, like it's not a big drag on things, maybe, or maybe it's like a bit of a random investment, but a good one. So it's just about finding the right time to get rid of it.
I agree. Uber Freight has a bright future.
Yeah.
Harry, in your opinion, what is the future of Uber?
What is the future of Uber? I think that they're kind of in a much more mature growth phase of the company, right? So we're not going to see anything explosive, anything crazy, just slow and steady. And I think in a way, they're a little bit of a function of the macro economy also, right? Like right now, if people have money to spend and they're willing to pay for rides, they're going to take Uber rides. And if there's a bunch of people that need work, oh man, Uber is a great opportunity. If you've been laid off or if you need quick access to cash, like not a lot of people realize that you can literally go sign up to drive or deliver with Uber. If you're doing delivery, you'll be approved same day sometimes. You can go out and do your first delivery and have money cashed out instantly in your bank account, like from the beginning to the end of the day. And it may not be a ton of money. Having that kind of opportunity is not going to be changing anytime soon. And I see them continuing to grow slow and steady in rideshare, in food delivery. We highlighted maybe there's a big growth opportunity in the future, but over time, but it's not going to happen overnight, with kids, for example, defaulting more to Uber and other mobility options. So I feel like it's going to be one of these big, mature growth type companies. I don't really see anything disrupting it anytime soon. And so maybe it's more in that cruising, slow and steady phase of its life cycle.
Slow and steady wins the race at the end of the day. And you're helping drivers.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing.
No, it's not. And you're helping drivers optimize their earnings, optimize their
Yep.
performance. If there's my audience is not drivers, but there's people that are interested. If they're interested in learning more about the rideshare guy, where can they go?
Definitely. Well, we're on basically any box on the internet. If you type in the rideshare guy, or if you type in anything about driving for Uber and Lyft, for those who are most interested, our website and our YouTube channel are primarily geared towards drivers. So there's a lot of interesting content there and learnings. And then the podcast that I do, the Rideshare Guy podcast, has a little bit more of a focus on industry topics and interviews and executives. And when I get folks like Lyft CEO or Uber CEO, if he ever comes back on my podcast, that's where it will be published.
There we go. So if anybody from Uber is listening, the message is to Dara. Harry and I would like to co-interview Dara together. We'll distribute on both of our platforms. I'll take the autonomy side. Harry will take the ride sharing side. Dara, let's have the conversation. Let's have you tell the economic growth story of Uber. Harry, as we look to wrap up this conversation, what would you like our listeners and viewers to take away with them today?
I think we covered a lot of different topics. And I think that for me, this intersection of rideshare, I'm interested to see intersection of rideshare and adjacent verticals, whether it's EV, autonomy would be a good example. I'm no expert in autonomy, but I do think it's interesting to see how this existing rideshare industry plays with autonomy, right? Because they're going to be pretty tightly linked, whether it's more product issues like how do you handle pukers and how do you handle pickup and drop offs at an AV, or if it's more broad, like how do you integrate the fleets, right? So I think this is a topic that I'm pretty interested in, and I think will be pretty exciting and a lot of opportunity because I don't think we're going to see a situation where it's like AVs over here and rideshare over here. They're going to be pretty closely mingled in a lot of different aspects going into the future.
It's going to be a hybrid network. That's why you and I will continue to have these conversations.